As nights grew longer and cold seeped into his bones, our infantryman Takashi lay in a deep trench near Port Arthur. He was surrounded by brothers in arms whose voices had long since faded to whispers of the past as they huddled together for warmth. The earthy scent that permeated from beneath their feet spoke not just of damp soil, but also of silent, unseen threats lurking in its embrace, telltale signs of Russian miners probing with purposeful intent right below them. The sound of pickaxes and the grunts that followed were constant companions to Takashi's nights. It was a symphony played out by men who understood too well how close they lay to death on any given evening, buried in darkness both literal and metaphorical. The world beyond their earthen walls felt far away, a place of bright lights and bustling streets that now seemed like nothing more than distant memories or nightmares from a life he left behind long ago. He could still hear the echoing cheers in his mind whenever Japan's fleet sailed into battle, their ships cutting through waves as if they were mere paper cutouts designed to break against something greater and far less yielding, or stark contrast to these moments of quietude where only distant artillery thunderclaps punctuated time like an unreliable metronome. The infantryman was a young man, his face still bearing the soft curves that hinted at days spent not in trenches but under sunlight's warm embrace back home. Yet here he lay with men who had grown hard around their resolve as much as they did against the biting cold of this frozen war zone. Every day brought new lessons, each one a stark reminder that modernization was essential if Japan were to stand equal in strength and spirit among great European powers, a revelation both empowering and humbling when pitted face to face with their mightier foes across the water's divide from Russia. As Takashi lay there, he couldn't help but be grateful for his country's recent embrace of Western military techniques that had taught them to construct fortifications that seemed impenetrable at first glance, yet were as vulnerable when faced with a relentless siege like the one unfurling in their midst. It was during these moments, wrapped up tight against winter's grip and listening for danger's silent approach, he reflected on this unexpected chapter of history where an Eastern power dared to challenge European defiance that had shattered his world into something new and terrifyingly beautiful at once. He thought often about the faces from home who watched with bated breath as their sons stepped forward onto foreign battlefields, some never returning after enduring nights like these in cold trenches, far removed from any sense of peace or tranquility. They knew back at Port City life, his heart ached for them all. The sounds around him were a reminder that even with every man's best efforts to fortify their positions, danger was eternally on the horizon. It came not always in formidable battalions, but sometimes as simple excavations by enemy miners seeking entry points underneath them, a threat most invisible yet equally deadly. Takashi knew this well and braced himself for an assault that could come without warning, a testament to his country's struggle against empires long considered invincible in their own right. As the night wore on with only distant sounds of gunfire from across no man's land keeping pace alongside Takashi's, thoughts and memories are blend so seamless that sometimes he could not distinguish between his personal history and this shared experience among men who sought victory through gritty endurance rather than swift conquest. He often wondered how many lives would be extinguished before their own war came to an abrupt, somber close. Yet within him burned a steadfast hope that the sacrifices made here might one day lead his homeland into a future where peace reigned supreme, once more a vision for which he clung with every breath taken in this suffocating darkness. Takashi's existence at Port Arthur, amidst an impenetrable network of trenches and fortifications that stretched like veins across the frozen landscape, was a testament to his people's unwavering determination against all odds, a narrative woven from threads both grimy with mudded bloodshed yet tinted by an indomitable spirit. As dawn approached and its first ray of light pierced through the heavy blanket of night, Takashi felt a mixture of relief and trepidation in his heart, relief for another day's reprieve from relentless fighting, yet fearing what new threats may arise with sun as rise. The trenches around Port Arthur had become more than just earthen walls. They were chapters of stories etched into the earth itself, each one recounted in hushed tones, as soldiers shared tales to distract from their encroaching fatigue and despair that often accompanied thoughts on homecoming without return. Takashi remembered his father's warnings about impious Russians speaking of Tsarist ambitions while the British spoke with equal fervor, yet he had never expected this shared battlefield to become such a crucible for personal growth and national identity. In these moments between daybreak choruses and the night's endless hum, Takashi found himself lost in thought about what his country would look like when peace finally came, a hopeful vision that seemed both fanciful and essential during times of strife. The sunrise brought a new kind of battle. As it broke over the horizon, so did enemy patrols emerge from their covert haunts in no man's land to scavenge for supplies or perhaps send silent messages across this chessboard that stretched out before the map board upon which every move mattered, and where each loss weighed heavily. Takashi's heart ached with the memory of his mother, her hands wrapped firmly around a photograph she would never let go amidst all their trials. It served as an anchor to normalcy in times when such things were luxuries beyond reach. As he lay there that morning among comrades in arms who had become brothers, by circumstance rather than choice, Takashi heard distant artillery rumbles echo across the frozen wasteland. They called their temporary abode a reminder of both impending doom and resilience. He pictured his mother's face when he would return to her warm embrace. It fueled a resolve in him not just for survival, but also as part of something larger than himself. The preservation of freedom from oppressors, once considered invincible, by all accounts before their might was challenged. Within each man fought his own private worst, constant gnawing fear that clung to Takashi like frost on bone, a reminder of what he had left behind, and the price it would cost him in dreams haunted during these waking hours spent beneath this unforgiving sky. Despite all things, however, there was still beauty here, a stubborn glimmer that fought for itself even as darkness loomed large over their heads day after wearying day. In the brief respite between gunfire and shells raining down from an enemy unseen, but ever present in its ferocity, Takashi often found himself contemplating existence. Was it worth striving so arduously for a future he might not see? Yet, even as doubt crept into his thoughts like shadows at dusk, there was something undeniably human about this shared struggle or connection between souls that transcended language and nationality. It bound them together with an understanding far deeper than any treaty or truce could offer. The sun crested the horizon fully as Takashi's thoughts turned to his own mother's strength, her unwavering courage in face of adversities unknown. It was a silent salute paid not just by him, but all those who heard tales from this far-flung outpost where humanity and horror were so intricately entwined. The air seemed colder with the weight of impending battles, yet Takashi felt warmth in his chest, a promise that even if he could never see beyond these trenches or taste sweet victory without cost upon his own necklace-encrusted body, there was honor to be found here and a purpose greater than himself. As another sun rose on the horizon of warfare's unforgiving landscape, at Port Arthur, a place where time seemed suspended between moments both horrendous and tender, Takashi embraced each day as it came with an inner quietude born from reflecting upon his journey through this crucible. He clung to visions that whispered of peace, not just for himself, but also the countless others like him who found themselves inexplicably linked by fates so often dictated on distant thrones and battlefields alike. Their stories were interwoven into Port Arthur's very fabric, a testament etched deep within its soil. As night once again claimed dominion over this frozen, as Takashi settled into his canvas bedroll that night within Port Arthur's frozen expanse, he found comfort in routine and ritual before sleep claimed him with gentle fingers of darkness. The previous day had been a symphony of clashing steel on metal, each note resonating through the hollow canyons formed by their trenches as men fought not just against nature, but also for something more profound than mere survival. It was liberty, honor, and an end to sorrow that they sought. The sun had risen with a promise of another day's struggle when Takashi's gaze fell upon the portrait tucked away in his rations pack, a cherished memento from home depicting him as but a boy beside his mother, whose eyes mirrored resolve and an untold depth that seemed to transcend any sorrow. The image had been with him since he first set foot on this foreign soil. Her smile was the thread through which Takashi wove solace amidst chaos. It reminded him of the time before war cast its long shadow across his life, and in those moments alone under star-studded skies back home where nothing but peace had reigned. The image stirred memories that flooded into Takashi's mind, soft touches as she taught him to read beneath the blinking lamplight of her humble study. Laughter shared in simple joys and trials alike, each a stitch within their family tapestry. The portrait was not merely an image, but also his anchor amidst stormy seas, her silent declaration that he carried with him into battle. I am the son of Takashi-san. But even as memories ebbed and flowed, reality pressed firmly against his consciousness. It came in waves at night when men would gather around a dwindling fire to share tales not just for entertainment, but also solace. These stories were lifeblood or testament of humanity that sustained their weary spirits through the long watches and cold, unforgiving evenings spent huddled together against Port Arthur's biting winds, which carried with it whispers from afar, tales spoke by seamen who had weathered stormy passages across oceans vast. Takashi often found himself at the heart of these gatherings, recounting his own experiences as one among many a soldier to weave their shared narrative, their tapestry, where each thread was imbued with meaning and resilience that only grew stronger when joined by others like him who carried not just burdens, but also dreams within the folds of their uniform. Thus, Takashi learned from these stories. He listened to tales of homecoming feasts in England's warmth, where families celebrated reunion with a bounty that fed both bellies and souls, a stark contrast to Port Arthur's own seasonal scarcity, yet equally cherished by those who remembered the spoils as they were. These stories, his mother's portrait, her enduring spirit, all coalesced into Takashi finding purpose in this shared human experience of loss and defiance against an encroaching darkness that sought to claim more than just land, but also futures untold, or future where tales like these became the legacy for generations yet unborn. As night cloaked Port Arthur once again, Takashi felt a kinship with every soul who called this place home during times of peace and turmoil alike. Their collective stories were an echo through time that transcended individual existence, a reminder woven into the fabric of history itself within these snow-laden grounds. A sense of tranquility settled upon him as he surrendered to sleep, embracing dreams where his mother's laughter intermingled with tales spun by fellow soldiers, visions filled with an everlasting hope that one day the soil beneath their frozen feet would nurture a new chapter in history, not just of war and strife, but also renewal, understanding, and perhaps most importantly, peace. Takashi's heart found warmth within these visions because he knew well enough. This is where legacy tales began to sprout. It was here at Port Arthur that they could blossom into stories of tomorrow's stories yet untold, but nonetheless waiting with patience for the world beyond warfare's unforgiving landscape. As dawn approached once more, Takashi awakened not just as a soldier within trenches scarred by time and bloodshed, but also as an inheritor of legacy, a chronicle etched deep into Port Arthur's very essence. His story was to be one amongst countless others. As Takashi's mind delved deeper into this nocturnal reverie, it transported him back to a time before war, when Port Arthur was merely a harbor, a place of commerce and daily life that thrummed with energy, quite unlike the one he experienced in his dream world now. The sound of seagull cries mingled freely without fear or consequence as fishermen hauled their catches. Children played under watchful eyes whose laughter echoed through alleyways like music to be cherished and preserved for eternity amidst the coming strife he was yet to endure. It was in this time of innocence that Takashi first met his best friend turned comrade, Hiroshi, a jovial spirit with eyes as bright as the northern lights during midnight skies over Port Arthur's farmlands and lush greenery which stretched beyond its waterfront. The pair shared a bond forged in mischief rather than misfortune, their friendship untouched by life's trials that would later define them through battles of attrition or juxtaposition to the reality Takashi now faced with each new daybreak and retreat into his dreaming mind. One warm summer evening under an amber-hued sky, Hiroshi had confided in him about a secret he harbored deep within, one that could potentially alter their fates during wartime's cruelties, or map to hidden treasures rumored among the locals but never truly believed. Intrigued by tales of pirate ships and fortunes lost beneath Port Arthur's waters, Takashi agreed to accompany Hiroshi on a clandestine quest for this elusive fortune that promised hope in times when such things were as scarce as the daylight they often found themselves living under. As nightfall approached, with stealthy steps and hushed whispers of conspiracy, Takashi felt an electric thrill coursing through his veins in anticipation for adventure beyond their ordinary lives that would soon be enveloped in shadow once more by the coming conflict he was fated to endure. The pair ventured towards a secluded cove where tales spoke of sunken ships bearing gold, silver doubloons lost amidst ancient coral reefs, and forgotten shipwrecks holding fast against time's relentless tide. Under the cloak of darkness, Takashi felt an exhilarating rush as they unearthed a weather-beaten chest from within a partially submerged hull or treasure that promised not only wealth but also respite and relief for their weary souls during times when such pleasures were rare. As he opened the rusty lock, his fingers met with cool metal against warm flesh. Gold coins shimmered like captured sunlight, imprisoning themselves in a trove as if seeking refuge from history's harshness or promise of dreams where battles could be forgotten and peace celebrated beyond their frozen grasp. As he lifted the treasure, Takashi felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for these moments that had become his sanctuary amidst loss, memories encapsulated in gold yet so precious compared to life's transient nature, are testament to humanity's resilience and spirit. The chest contained not just coins, but stories, each piece a whisper of what was once commonplace before the war had stolen it all away. Every coin told tales as rich and varied as Port Arthur itself, with histories that spanned empires beyond his comprehension yet felt deeply personal to him in this shared experience. As he clutched an ornate silver coin, engraved with a seaside idyll of merriment and laughter, a stark contrast from the grim reality awaiting them at dawn's approach back within Port Arthur's harbor-gate that had become all too familiar to their weary hearts. Hiroshi looked on in silent agreement, his eyes reflective pools mirroring Takashi's emotional voyage through this scent. As Takashi and Hiroshi sat encased in their makeshift shelter within an abandoned building's embrace, they allowed themselves to be carried back by waves of nostalgia that flowed from each coin, taken out gently like a stream unfurling its secrets. The night air held the weightlessness of dreams, yet danced with whispers of their lost past. Voices intermingled in an audible tapestry spun around them as they listened intently, finding solace and unity within shared memories that no longer belonged to any era but were forever etched into their souls. Takashi picked up a faded coin depicting children frolicking under cherry blossoms, the image of youthful innocence amidst war's relentless shadow, and he felt an unexpected tenderness for those days when life was as simple yet fleeting as petals on water. Hiroshi reached out to touch a coin adorned with naval ships in full sail. Each vessel seemed like silent guardians against the encroaching darkness that sought to claim their homeland and spirit, reminding him of strength derived from unity. An echoing call for Solidar Zero the next day dawned gray, but hopeful as they continued their journey. Their small party moved through Port Arthur's desolate streets in silence, each one lost within the labyrinthine relics that told tales not just of conquest and defeat, but also of daily life under siege, an existence punctuated by moments both mundane and profoundly significant to those who lived it. The sun's rays played with reflections on a series of coins they found in the pocket of clothing discarded beside a decrepit sign for Dorn Calf. Takashi couldn't help but marvel at how something so intimate as currency could capture such vivid memories. From steam rising lazily into morning skies, to laughter that rang clear and true through empty streets where once the cacophony of life swelled like a symphony. Through Port Arthur's forlorn boulevards they walked until twilight beckoned them towards an ancient lighthouse, its beams slicing across waves crashed by warships, now but spectral ships moored in the bay below as if awaiting resurrection with each setting sun. Here stood Takashi and Hiroshi at a threshold of reflection. Before this sentinel keeper of history's secrets, they vowed to honor those who had once called these shores home by sharing their discoveries, not just for the sake of preserving tales, but as tributes woven into memory itself. Inside an abandoned lighthouse kitchen, Takashi found himself kneading dough with Hiroshi and another survivor named Miko, a task so simple yet somehow profound in its communion, their hands working together to create sustenance from scant provisions they salvaged among the ruins. Beneath flickering candlelight, stories flowed as easily between them about summers spent fishing along these very shores and evenings when music would fill every corner of Port Arthur until nightfall enveloped all in velvet darkness, a cadence that now seemed an impossible dream, but remained suspended within their shared consciousness. The storytelling became less like tales told under starlit skies and more about the human condition itself, as Takashi's fingers traced lines of sorrow on his palm alongside those who had once loved deeply in times before war, each line a memory that would not be forgotten even if their voices were. They realized how much they craved to feel connection despite being mere echoes themselves, an understanding born from the very essence of what it meant to endure and survive against all odds, with hearts yearning for rest amidst turmoil's shadow. As night folded around them like a shroud woven by generations before, Takashi felt his own heartbeat mingle with the rhythmic lapping of waves that had witnessed countless sunsets and risen again to embrace new dawns, an enduring testament to cycles beyond human comprehension. He looked at Hiroshi, their shared glance a silent pact between kindred spirits united not by blood but bound together through the threadbare fabric of history itself. Each coin in his pocket was now less about material wealth and more as keys that could open doors within the soul's intricate mansion. They found themselves at an ancient shrine, its weathered stones holding fast to stories older than any currency or memory they possessed. Here Takashi offered a small silver coin, not for monetary value, but in reverence of spirits, and like Takashi and Hiroshi found themselves enveloped by a gentle embrace of twilight as they continued their pilgrimage towards understanding, under skies painted with strokes of purples and oranges that mirrored the complexities within them both, each color blending seamlessly into another like whispers fading in hushed breaths. As night's curtain began to descend upon the world around them, Takashi thought about how life was a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow alike. His own experiences were but one pattern amongst countless others that formed the grand design before him. He had once loved deeply in times when peace reigned supreme. Now, amidst strife, they found solace not just within each other's presence, but also through their shared journey back to a time of innocence and harmony with nature's rhythms. This was more than mere nostalgia for Takashi. It felt like homecoming. They reached the shrine under an archway that seemed as if standing guard over secrets untold, its stones slick from recent rains whispering tales of devotion and reverence to those who would listen with a heart willing enough to hear beyond words. Here Takashi offered his coin, not for commerce but in homage. The shrinekeeper nodded slightly as though the gesture spoke volumes that needed no translation, her eyes reflective pools mirroring generations past whose footsteps had come before them under this very sun and moon through which they now sought respite. The air grew colder with night's advance. Takashi wrapped his arm around Hiroshi as if to shield both their spirits from the creeping chill. It was more than a simple gesture of comfort, for in each other's arms lay an unspoken promise that no enemy could sever. They shared stories not spoken aloud but conveyed through looks and touches, tales entwined with laughter like ivy around ancient walls where history itself seemed to listen intently while they reminisced about the simple pleasures of life. A warm embrace, sweet cherry blossoms in bloom, or melodies carried on springtime breezes. The shrinekeeper approached them with wisdom etched into her gentle countenance. She understood their silent vows better than any script could articulate, and guided Takashi's hand to a pedestal where his coin was placed, an offering accepted without expectation or demand for anything in return but the continuation of the sacred connection. With each step backward from the shrine, they felt as though retreating not just through space but time. Their journey seemed less about reaching distant goals and more focused on returning to inner sanctums, long shuttered by fears unspoken during brighter days now buried in darkness, embraced beneath starlit canopies. Walking side by side, they conversed not with words but through the eyes that spoke volumes. Takashi looked into Hiroshi's depth of azure and saw his own reflection distorted yet familiar like a friend across vast distances yearning for reunion. He knew then their bond was deeper than mere companionship or obligation. They were kindred spirits, united not by shared blood, but the timeless thread that linked all humanity through trials endured together. Here at this shrine where past and present coalesced into one silent understanding. Life's fragility lay in its transient beauty like cherry blossoms on a breezy spring night. As they walked, Takashi thought of his own heartbeat, once racing with the fearsome drums of warfare that had since quieted to soft pattering raindrops upon ancient cobblestones. He realized how much their survival was itself an act of defiance against adversity's insidious whispers, a testament to resilience flowering amidst desolation's decay. The shrine-keeper shared tales woven with threads spun from the very essence of existence. Stories where love and loss danced together in endless loops like waves upon tempestuous seas. She spoke not only for her own people but echoed their collective soul's wisdom, imparting lessons that transcended epochs. Together they sat on a weather-worn bench under the watchful gaze of ancestral spirits. Takashi and Hiroshi found peace in shared silence as much as any conversation could offer. Their mutual understanding was an unbreakable bond forged not from words but through experiences that had tested them beyond measure. As they watched a lantern's glow flicker amidst shadows dancing upon the shrine's walls like phantoms of hope, flee as twilight's embrace deepened around them, Takashi and Hiroshi found themselves enveloped in a hushed reverence that only sacred places could evoke, an intimate sanctuary where time seemed to stand still amid the echoes of ancient prayers. The shrine-keeper had left with her tales now resting softly upon their hearts as she departed into the damp night air carrying stories like lanterns illuminating paths through darkness for those who listened closely enough. The two old friends sat quietly on a stone bench that bore witness to countless seasons of contemplation and communion with spirits past. Its surface was marred by age, yet held fast beneath their weary backs, as if it were the very foundation upon which they had built their friendship itself, an unspoken testament to endurance. Their shared silence spoke volumes in ways words never could, a language of intertwined fingers and knowing glances that conveyed comfort without utterance, understanding beyond superficiality. Each look between them was as much about the world outside this hallowed ground, with all its chaos and unpredictability, as it was an oath to protect one another from harm. As they remained ensconced in their silent vigil, Takashi's gaze caught sight of a lone cherry blossom falling gracefully onto the wet earth before them, petals like delicate translucent snowflakes that whispered secrets only understood by those willing to listen. It was then he noticed Hiroshi's hand reaching out, as though drawn towards this singular moment of beauty, a gesture both tender and profound in its simplicity. His companion had always been the keeper of his thoughts more than just tales. Their bond seemed forged not only through shared trials, but also an innate sensitivity to each other's unvoiced dreams, fears, and hopes. A connection that transcended time itself like threads woven into fabric. They had seen much together since the war ended years ago. Loss mourned with silent tears as fresh as morning dew upon their cheeks, joy found and laughter shared between strangers turned friends whose paths crossed only by fate's designated scripting of life's theater. All these experiences etching indelible marks within them both. Takashi felt himself being carried back to memories now faded with time, yet ever vivid as if painted upon the very air around him. He closed his eyes and allowed their weight on each other's, souls like gentle rain nurturing parched soil, a communion that had always been part of this sacred place where spirits walked among mortals. As darkness deepened its hold, Hiroshi found comfort in Takashi's presence not just as an old friend, but also as the embodiment of shared history and unspoken promises to stand by one another through life's capricious whims, a vow sealed with every heartbeat that resonated between them like sacred chants rising from distant temples. Without realizing it, they had surrendered themselves completely into the embrace of this shared moment. Neither mind nor body needed to move when such profound connection was felt pulsing beneath their skin, a testament not just to survival, but also thriving in defiance against adversity's insidious whispers. As night deepened its hold, Takashi and Hiroshi knew the world outside these sacred walls would greet them with challenges anew come dawn. Yet within this sanctuary where past met present as seamlessly as two rivers converging before flowing into one, they had found peace in shared silence that transcended epochs, a testament to resilience blooming amidst desolation's decay. As the lantern's glow flickered once more upon their bench like phantoms of hope dancing through darkness before them, Takashi felt as if he could reach out and touch it, not because such actions were within his power, but rather they represented a beacon guiding him forward into tomorrow's uncertainties. With hearts steady against the tempestuous seas of life's waves crashing upon them like never before, Takashi understood that their journey ahead was one paved not with words alone, but intertwined deeply within experiences shared, a bond forged in fire and tempered by water, enduring as steadfastly as mountains standing watch over sacred shrines. their souls entwined beyond the veil of mortality. Takashi felt himself to be part of something far greater than mere friendship or companionship with Hiroshi, a connection that transcended not only time. In Chapter 8 of their journey towed for a tale as timeless as its characters were destined to be. Night had come, and with it a profound sense of tranquillity settled upon Takashi's spirit like gentle dew on grass at the first light of dawn. The stars twinkled above them in silent agreement that this sacred space was indeed their sanctuary, where two souls could find solace amidst life's relentless tempests, knowing full well the storm clouds lurked beyond these walls to greet with uncertainty come morning's light. As Takashi and Hiroshi sat in quietude on that very bench or place of refuge where echoes of history whispered ancient secrets through their shared silence, a bond deeper than time seemed etched into the air, woven as intricately as threads upon silk or strands within kintsugi. It was here they had discovered an unspoken kinship that transcended epochs and cultures alike, a testament to resilience blooming amidst desolation's decay like cherry blossoms in the heart of winter, their fragile beauty defying despair with each delicate petal. Their eyes mirrored reflections from within themselves now that they understood, an understanding forged through trials and tribulations akin to mountains standing sentinel over sacred shrines and changing yet shaped by the winds of change around them, their spirits as intertwined beyond mortality's veil. And so Takashi found himself within his own heart's core, for he was no longer merely an observer, but a participant in this journey with Hiroshi, vessel filled to the brim not just with friendship or companionship, but something far more profound that transcended mere existence. As they sat beneath the watchful gaze of ancient gods and goddesses carved upon stone, Takashi reached out towards nothingness, as if trying to grasp a thread leading beyond this world, or beacon guiding him forward into tomorrow's uncertainties with its ethereal glow like phantoms dancing through the darkness. Within his heart grew an understanding that their connection was not merely one of two friends navigating life's tempestuous seas together, but rather a bond woven from shared experiences forged in fire and tempered by water, as enduringly steadfast as mountains standing watch over sacred shrines. Together they had faced down ghosts that roamed the forgotten corners of history, their spirits intertwined beyond mortality's veil, where past met present seamlessly like two rivers converging before flowing into one, their destinies forever entwined in time's tapestry woven with strands both tangible and spectral. As the night deepened its hold upon them all around, Takashi felt their souls resonate within a realm beyond mere flesh, where memories were etched not just into minds, but imbued forevermore in spirit, or shared memory bank that transcended epochs as timelessly as seasons cycling from spring's bloom to winter's frost. And though they knew the world outside these sacred walls would greet them with challenges anew come dawn, Takashi felt he could stand bravely before whatever awaited beyond those ancient stones, for within this sanctuary where past met present as seamlessly as two rivers converging, a peace had settled upon his soul that no storm clouds of life's tempests could ever whisk away. For in the end, Takashi knew their bond was not merely one forged by circumstance, but something far greater, a connection transcendent and timeless like constellations traced across night skies, forever shining as testament to resilience blooming amidst desolation's decay. And with Hiroshi upon his side, he felt himself part of a story untold yet deeply etched into the annals of history, a tale whispered by fireside tales and sung in ballads echoing through time, where two souls could find solace amidst life's relentless tempests. As they sat together on that very bench beneath a sky dappled with stars, Takashi felt their spirits meld into one, or unity not just of purpose but destiny as well defined and certain as mountain ranges cutting through the earth's ancient face, or rivers carving intricate paths across landscapes. It was here, in this sacred space between heartbeats, where two souls could find solace amidst life's relentless tempests, a testament to resilience blooming amid desolation, or bond forged not. As Takashi and Hiroshi sat on that very bench beneath a sky dappled with stars, they felt their spirits meld into one, or unity not just of purpose, but destiny as well defined and certain as mountain ranges cutting through the earth's ancient face, or rivers carving intricate paths across landscapes. The night seemed to wrap them in its velvet embrace, a blanket under which they felt safe from life's relentless tempests that roared beyond their sacred space of respite. Takashi took Hiroshi's hand gently and traced the calluses formed by time spent toad both hardened yet tender, as if to symbolize not just survival, but thriving amidst life's trials. Their bond, forged over shared dreams of exploration, that had led them here on this night where past met present in a place neither could fully grasp nor explain its significance beyond their hearts. Understanding or sanctuary carved out by fate and circumstance under the watchful eyes of ancient gods, who seemed to smile down upon these two mortals. A gentle breeze carried whispers from afar, tales that only those willing to listen could hear, stories as old as time itself, where love conquered all adversity, where warriors found peace in each other's embrace and sorrows were soothed by the melody of shared laughter. These murmurs intertwined with their own heartbeats, weaving a silent symphony that spoke directly to Takashi's soul as he looked into Hiroshi's eyes, an irrefutable testament to resilience blooming amidst desolation in the form of two souls seeking solace. As they sat there together on this very bench, a sense of serenity enveloped them like morning mist clinging gently around verdant hillsides kissed by sunlight, a reminder that even within shadows cast long and dark, beauty could emerge as ethereal whispers woven into the tapestry of life. Takashi's thoughts meandered through memory lane, where moments with Hiroshi transcended mere human experiences. They were imprints etched upon his very being, a legacy not bound by time, but a perpetual dance between light and shadow that played out on an endless stage beneath the cosmos. His fingers found solace in tracing imaginary constellations across Hiroshi's knuckles, each star representing shared secrets and dreams unfurled under this ancient canopy where histories converged with present joys, or sacred space that stood as a beacon for those who sought refuge from the chaos of existence. As Takashi closed his eyes momentarily to let himself sink deeper into their unity, he could almost hear distant echoes of ancestral voices mingling with gentle night whispers, tales told by fireside stories and ballads, some in harmony, that resonated through time itself, or chronicle not just lived, but felt. The bench beneath them was more than mere wood crafted for sitting. It became a vessel harboring the essence of every journey they had undertaken together, from humble beginnings where their friendship blossomed amidst cityscapes' hustle to moments when desolation's decay enveloped all in its cold grip. Yet here, surrounded by nature reclaiming what once was hers alone, a testament that even forgotten lands could be reborn into sanctuaries of hope and togetherness, where resilience bloomed amidst the ruins left behind by history's unkindest hours. Takashi's heart swelled with gratitude for this unexpected gift. They had stumbled upon a place that seemed to exist at once in a realm beyond reality, yet firmly rooted within it, where every touch and shared silence spoke volumes of an invisible bond as deep-rooted as the oldest trees sheltering their sanctuary. It was here, on these sacred grounds, under starlit skies, they found themselves not only journeyers along life's unpredictable path, but guardians preserving a legacy that thrived through love and unity against all odds, or bond transcendent, timeless like constellations traced across night skies. As the moon ascended to its throne in heaven's vault, casting silver threads upon their faces, Takashi's mind painted visions of a future where together they would face whatever awaited beyond those ancient stones, for within this sanctuary where past met present as seamlessly as two rivers converging. He knew that even if the world outside continued to spin in its unending dance with chaos and uncertainty, for them, here amidst Stonecar, the map unfurled itself under his touch as if to guide him back through a dream he had never left, or pilgrimage undertaken in the heart's deepest chambers of hope rather than footsteps taken upon dusty earth, for it was here where reality entwined with law. Each step on this hallowed ground felt like an echo from within his soul's own chamber, every breath a meditation and prayer to remember that all things born in love could weather any storm the world might whip up against them. With each new day, Takashi found himself drawn deeper into these sacred groves, where he had discovered not only ruins or city once vibrant with culture and life now claimed back by nature's embrace, but also a place of communion between spirits that transcended mere human understanding. The trees stood like elders in the congregation, their roots sunk deep into stories untold, but felt through every leafy vein pulsing beneath his fingers. They whispered secrets only when hearts are tuned to listen and eyes closed against worldly distractions that sought not this sanctuary. Here under twilight skies, The boundary between then and now blurred into a singular moment, where past met present as seamlessly as two rivers converging upon ancient stones etched with glyphs of bygone tongues, yet humming melodies that resonated within Takashi's very marrow. It was here, amid the cooling embrace of evening breezes carrying scents of wildflowers and earth after rain, where he felt an unspoken promise swelling in his chest, or vow to be a steward not merely for this land, but also its legacy through love's enduring language. One night, as the crescent moon claimed her throne upon heaven's firmament, casting silver threads like gossamer cobwebs across their faces, Takashi and his companions, each one drawn to these hallowed grounds by a similar heartbeat of purpose-shared stories, that danced around campfires with crackling flames, as if they too knew the ancient songs sung beneath starlit skies. They spoke not just in words, but through every gesture, touches heavy with meaning and shared silences laden in depths, where unspoken understandings bloomed like night-blooming flowers greeting first light after endless darkness, for within this sanctuary their souls found resonance beyond measure as they journeyed upon life's capricious path. As days melted into each other, Takashi felt the weight of his worldly endeavors lift from shoulders once burdened by duty and expectation a release that allowed him to float amidst these sacred groves where time seemed a mere suggestion rather than rule, its passage marked only by changing seasons instead of ticking hands. Here was solace not just for body but spirit, offering refuge in the arms of nature's own design as they embraced one another with tenderness that belied their shared trials against history's unkindest hours, and whirled beyond these sacred walls, where resilience bloomed amidst ruins left behind by past follies. Their presence within this hidden valley was an act of defiance, a refusal to let forgotten chapters close on themselves or be buried under layers of dust that time's unforgiving march might otherwise enforce upon them. They stood together as guardians, preserving a legacy thriving through love and unity against all odds, for within this sanctuary where past met present as seamlessly as two rivers converging. One evening, while the sun's last rays painted amber on mountain ridges that cradled them like ancient gods watching over humanity's tender passage of life cycles, Takashi and his companions gathered in a circle, not unlike their ancestors who had once found solace here to a collective breath before sharing dreams woven from the threads of countless lives now passed through time's unblinking eye. They spoke then as if words could weave themselves into existence just as easily, tales that danced on air like dandelion seeds seeking new soils to call home, where every storyteller's voice added as Takashi and his companions circled in silence around their flickering campfire's glowing embers. They felt a profound connection to those who had come before them, ancestors whose spirits were as much part of this hidden valley as the wildflowers that dotted its floor. They sensed an unspoken continuum stretching back through time into their very souls, and in it was interwoven every tale ever told beneath these ancient boughs. "Tell us a story," Takashi began after what felt like hours of reflective stillness, kind that seemed to pause the world outside this sacred space, as if holding its breath alongside them. His companions nodded, their faces illuminated by firelight and anticipation, for ancient tales were born under new tongues and fresh ears. "Once upon a time," Takashi started with an earnest voice tinged with reverence, "when the earth was young and all that existed were its creatures and plants, each part of nature had purpose. Each living thing contributed to life's intricate dance." His companions leaned in closer, their own tales ready on cue. A rustling from a nearby bush caught his attention for just an instant before he continued undeterred. There was the forest, Takashi described with affection lacing every word, as if painting scenes of emerald and jade upon canvas. His fingers traced invisible paths through air, conjuring images that seemed to weave into reality within their circle's shared space, or collective imagination blooming under moonlight's watchful gaze. "The forest thrived with life," he said, as Takashi watched his companions listen intently while the fire crackled its own rhythm, punctuating each sentence like heartbeats echoing through time's corridor, a tapestry of existence where every thread mattered. The circle grew silent to honor that truth, each person understanding their role in this grand design was as vital today just as it had been for the ancient spirits who once walked these lands freely and with respect, taking only what nature provided without thought of greed or excess. Kakashi paused his storytelling thread, then looked into each face around him before continuing earnestly. But not all that lived in this forest was gentle. There were those whose hearts harbored darkness as deep as the shadows beneath mighty trees. He glanced at the ground, where fallen leaves lay like a mosaic of life's transient beauty. These beings found themselves lost amidst nature's splendor until realization dawned upon them that they were part of something far greater than their solitary existence. The words seemed to hang in time as his companions absorbed the tale, understanding each creature within Takashi's narrative fought inner battles and sought redemption through unity. In this shared struggle for harmony with all life forms stood a testament, a reminder that balance is achieved not by dominance but by coexistence and respect. Lessons as relevant now in their own lives, nestled within the hidden valley's embrace of continuity between past and present. And so Takashi concluded with softness brimming beneath his calm tone. They learned to listen and truly hear one another's heartbeats amidst nature's chorus. The circle felt a collective sigh, as if the very earth exhaled alongside them, their spirits lifted upon this shared journey through stories and life itself. As night deepened its hue around them, Takashi spoke of stars that guided lost souls to safe havens, celestial beacons reflecting in a nearby lake's mirror-like surface provided by the valley's own design for those wandering without direction or purpose found solace here. In time, he whispered, his voice barely carrying above nature's lullaby of rustling leaves and distant bird calls that seemed to echo tales older than words themselves. Stars wink into existence with stories untold there, like a legacy passed down through generations. The group's faces were awash in wonder, the very thought sending ripples across waters both within their souls and upon this sacred spot by nature's hand. Takashi leaned forward as he spoke of spirits who once danced with these star ancestors, whose laughter still echoes through hidden valleys where memories are kept alive like embers in a campfire's heart, ready to warm and guide those willing enough seekers on their way home. We too dance among the heavens, Takashi shared of his companions as they had been tolders. If each step taken upon this sacred earth was but in chapter 12 of our journey through time and tales, by moonlight's gleam we found ourselves in a place where shadows seemed to play with light itself, a realm known as Echoing Glen. The fading sun painted streaks across the sky, as if it were reluctant to bid farewell. Yet here Takashi led us into night's embrace under an ever-deepening blanket of stars and velvet darkness, a transition that seemed both gentle and natural in its own ethereal way. "Look around you," he began softly as we settled down on the mossy earth beneath ancient oaks whose leaves whispered secrets with every subtle rustling sound they made against one another or to our skin when brushed by a cool breeze that carried tales of distant shores and forgotten lands. "The glen is more than just this tranquil spot. It's the cradle for stories untold, where history sleeps under foliage canopies." Akashi's words were as serene as they came from his lips, in invitation to share in memories that transcended time. He beckoned us closer, and our ears tuned not just into the symphony of nighttime sounds, but also toward a tale he had learned, one passed down through generations within this very glen. It was about a place beyond hills where spirits danced under starlit skies until dawn's first light kissed them goodbye. As we listened intently to Takashi's narrative of yore, our imaginations took flight alongside the tales. He spun our journey back through time, when humans roamed freely and lived harmoniously with nature's heartbeat echoing in sacred glen. The spirits spoke wisdom into his ears as if they were kin rather than phantoms that lingered. Takashi, too, felt their presence within the very air he breathed, their warmth like sunlight on skin during a clear day of springtime thaw, but more profound and ethereal in its nature. He recounted how ancient ancestors once roamed these lands freely under starlit skies. They were not mere tales to tell, for their wisdom still clung to the winds that blew through Echoing Glen like a soft caress from time itself. Their laughter, he mused as if inviting it back into our world with his voice alone, still dances in this very air around us. We all closed our eyes and felt their joyful echoes resonating within our connection to the past that was both palpable yet whimsically tender. These spirits, Takashi continued as he delved deeper into legends of old, once believed themselves lost among stars until they found sanctuary in Echoing Glen. He described how these wandering souls were led to the valley's designer haven that mirrored their celestial guides above. As if by magic or nature's nurturing hand alone, This place became where spirits sought solace and guidance. Its waters reflective of starlight provided a connection between skyward dreamers and earthbound wanderer alike. With every word Takashi spoke about these celestial beings, guardians who watch over lost souls from above their heads, the protectors that guide us through life's dark woods with silent strength at nightfall. Our minds painted pictures of starry-eyed dancers twirling in a cosmic ballet, where every movement told stories to those willing enough seeker. Takashi leaned forward now, and his voice took on an almost reverent tone as he shared how the spirits danced among these very stars, their laughter carrying through hidden valleys like embers kept alive by memories in a campfire's heart, ready at any time to warm or guide lost souls wandering without purpose. The group around him was awash with wonder. Takashi's tales had woven themselves into our very essence, as if the glen itself were listening and absorbing every word like sponge soaking up water. Echoing glen lay before us not just an empty space, but a living narrative tapestry of history that unfolded with each breath we took in this sacred place by nature's hand, where stories passed down through generations became our own silent companions under the watchful gaze of constellations. And now, as I share these tales, he whispered into the night air brimming with ancient spirits and starlight-drenched memories that seemed to slip between us like wisps of dreams caught in a breeze. We too dance among them, our feet barely touching earth, as Takashi's voice gradually calmed into a soft murmur that mirrored our own resting hearts. His fingers traced patterns in the air, geometric shapes shaped by tales spun from yarns of tradition and memory intertwined with starlike threads drawn across night's canvas. With each word he spoke, it felt as if centuries-old echoes wrapped around us like a warm blanket against our skin. Stories that had lived through the ages now found their way into every fiber of my being, soaking deeply within me alongside the dew at dawn's touch and absorbing eagerly with each sunset we bid farewell to. The glen, cradled by mountains like a mother in her arms, sighed contentedly as if it too had heard tales that spanned back through time immemorial, whispering them into the ears of those who sought its solace beneath the watchful eyes of constellations etched upon heaven's vault. The ancient stones stood guard around us like silent sentinels, their secrets hidden in plain sight only for souls brave enough to understand their true language, that hummed with a harmony felt within bones and beating hearts when night's chill wrapped its embrace over all we had heard so far. As Takashi's tales wove themselves more intricately into the very air, I found myself lost in thought as he described how spirits once danced here in Sing, where now only shadows slid across soft moss and fallen leaves crunched underfoot like forgotten footnotes from long gone times. These were no ordinary dances, but rituals of gratitude to the Earth Mother herself, a celebration that spanned eras as old as time before, becoming whispers in night winds now felt against my cheek, or presence both elusive and tangible when gazing upwards at an unblemished sky. And so we danced among spirits of air. Our bodies swayed gently, guided by stories that pulsated with the heartbeat of this very glen, where time seemed to fold upon itself like pages in a well-thumbed book, hand turning past into present and future all at once. With every twirl and leap onto unseen platforms woven from moonlight's silver threads, Takashi conjured an image not just for the mind, but also as our feet mimicked movements too subtle yet perfectly synchronized with rhythms only felt in dreamscapes upon which reality seemed to blur. The glen itself joined us, our partner unseen and unfelt by touches of hands, a chorus without sound that vibrated through souls as if echoing from within the heartwoods where ancient oaks stood tall like sentinels, guarding secrets not meant for mortal ears alone. Takashi's narratives twisted into our own spirit's fabric. Tales spun of love and loss, warfare waged beneath Celeste Zero-Isle battleships against invaders from realms unseen to the eye, but felt deep within souls as they marched through history, leaving footprints in layers upon this very soil we trod so lightly now. In our dance of remembrance and reverie, I learned that stories carry not just words or images for minds, eyes. Rather, they are the essence imbuing life with emotions, colors a rainbow painted across memories, where each hue represents a feeling felt deeply within one's chest. Takashi shared of heroes and villains who lived as mythic beings here in this glen long before humanity walked its paths, their stories intertwined so intimately with the land that even now it whispered them to those whose hearts are open enough for listening, or tales spun from truths known only by Earth Mother herself. As Takashi spoke of battles fought not just upon hills, but within beating chests heavy laden with hopes and fear, I found myself feeling the weight lifting off my shoulders like a cloak shed at daybreak's first light, or perhaps it was that we had unknowingly danced our way through these emotions already present in us. The stories he told bore roots so deep within this Glen's soul. They were whispers of love lost and found, echoes carrying forth into the night air as if to be heard by anyone but ourselves, or symphony composed for ears only meant to listen when hearts are willing enough, seekers on paths walked 1,000 times before. And now that Takashi had woven himself so tightly amongst our shared tales of joy and sorrow, love found and loss, his spirit resonated with mine as if we were one or single entity moving through the glen where past met present under watchful eyes. As we stand here, I began softly, while Takashi nodded at my words with the quiet strength that seemed woven into his being like threads of silver within dark cloth. It's not just our shared journey in this glen that binds us, but also a connection to all who came before. The land itself holds memories deep-rooted and vast as these very trees. Takashi turned towards me then, the corners of his eyes crinkling with what I could only describe as gentle laughter, a sound like rain tapping upon old glass that resonated within my heart to a rhythm so harmonious it seemed part of our dialogue. This glen, he continued in low but warm chords that dance between us, is where spirits once roamed freely. Their tales are etched into every leaf and stone here. I looked at him then as we watched the sky blush with twilight's first kiss, a reminder of how even now our own stories were being scribed in this hallowed place. It was an acknowledgement that although Takashi bore his history, he had also been touched by mine. Perhaps it was just a matter of fate, but the glen itself guiding us to share and understand one another's past sorrows and joys, as if our spirits were linked across time like branches on opposite ends of this ancient forest. And so, Takashi said, his voice carrying an undercurrent of melancholy that seemed almost a language unto its own in the glen's embrace, our tales are not merely words, but imprinted souls upon these grounds, become part of something greater. His gaze was distant for just a moment, as if he were seeing through centuries past. The spirits here tell us about lost loves and unfinished journeys. We too find ourselves on paths to rediscovery. I watched him, my mind adrift in thought, until I realized that Takashi's presence had become the very essence of this glen, or part of its continuing story. He was no longer just a visitor, but an old friend who shared with me tales not only from his life, but also those whispered by Earth Mother herself to souls open and willing, much like our own narratives here in her bosom, were being written wordlessly upon the air we breathed together, as if each had always belonged. As night began its slow descent over Glen Afton, with stars peeking through twilight's last embers of light to guide us onward, I knew that our shared experiences here would remain etched in my being, just like Takashi's were now a part of minor melded history born from the soulful whispers carried forth by echoes into night air. And as we stood together beneath canopies older than time itself, with hearts entwined and spirits allied, I felt an unwavering sense that our journey here was not yet complete, for every ending holds a new beginning just waiting to unfold like the petals of dawn-blossomed flowers greeting us at each sunrise. The glen had woven itself into Takashi's essence as much as he, and through him it seemed now part of mere living testament that history is not only told but also experienced in every heartbeat shared under the boughs of this ancient woodland sanctuary where past meets present. As we prepared to leave Glen Afton behind for just a moment more and continued on our journey, I knew even as my hand closed around Takashi's that whatever lay ahead would always be touched by these Lansby, the spirits who roamed here long before us all came into being, their stories forever cradled in time's gentle arms. With each step away from Glen Afton and towards tomorrow, I felt a renewed sense of belonging not just to Takashi but also this sacred earth that had become my home within its embracer place, where every memory was as real as the feeling of grass beneath bare feet or leaves brushing against cheek. The world beyond our glen may be vast and unknown like so many unexplored paths, yet here in these woods we found a piece of ourselves intertwined with all that is timeless as we stepped through Glen Afton's ancient gates for what felt like the last time before our journey continued on. A gentle breeze whispered secrets of old among the towering pines that had watched over this place since times immemorial. The world beyond was vast and promising, yet so unknown compared to these familiar woods, where each stone beneath my feet told tales older than humanity itself for comfort, as I clutched Takashi's hand, feeling his heartbeat a steady drum echoing the rhythm of our ancestors who had also sought solace in Glen Afton. The forest floor was cool and damp with morning dew that reflected tiny prisms of light into my eyes like jewels forged from nature's own workshop, reminding me why Takashi loved to say the woods here were a part of his solar sacred place, where memories lived as vividly in our minds today as they had when we first discovered them. I remember one night under this very canopy years ago, with my grandfather. He pointed out constellations that told stories, guiding us through the woods just like the ones now cradled gently by his weathered hands, which still shook slightly from age and emotion as Takashi's eyes darkened over our shared glances. We were not merely walking in a forest, but journeying within time itself. He spoke of spirits that danced here, invisible to all save those who truly listen, at a notion I had always found fascinating yet elusive until now. As the sun climbed higher and bathed Glen Afton in golden hues today, Takashi pressed a small amulet against my heart, where his grandfather's initial G beaten into silver still lay embedded, a promise of protection from this ancient realm that he had always believed to touch even as mortal hands passed through. I felt its cool weight and knew it was more than just superstition. These woods were alive, holding us in a cocoon spun by nature's own handcrafted loom, where dreams could take flight on whispering leaves like doves released from the womb of dawn itself. Our path led to an open glade filled with wildflowers that seemed too vibrant for this world, yet so in tune, a visual symphony conducted by unseen maestros who knew just when each petal should unfurl its beauty, like actors on a stage set before us every morning without fail. Takashi always insisted it was the spirits of Glen Afton that nurtured these flowers with tender care, and now I could see how his grandfather had once told me tales where flora spoke to those who would hear them if only they opened their hearts wide enough, like we did each day since our arrival. In this glade stood a mighty oak whose roots delved deep into the earth as its branches stretched towards heaven, an arboreal guardian of Glen Afton that had been Takashi's favorite tree, a meeting place for generations where stories were shared and secrets entrusted to silent witnesses. We often played around it like children beneath a watchful sky. Our laughter mingled with the songs of birds, an innocent harmony now lost but not forgotten in these hallowed woods that had wrapped us tightly together over time's long tapestry, a bond stronger than mere kinship and closer to sacred communion. As we approached Glen Afton's final gate this day, the air grew heavy with a sorrowful melancholy, unique only for places where heartbeats are deeply intertwined. Takashi looked at me through misty eyes, as if seeing my reflection in his soul's pool that had become indistinguishable from our own. Our steps were slower, nor respectful and deliberate, like dancers who knew the music was drawing to a close on this final act of an eternal play scripted by time itself, where every goodbye is also always just another hello waiting in the wings for tomorrow's embrace. Our farewell here felt not as an end, but more so a promise that these woods would continue whispering tales and guardians like Takashi to those who ventured beneath their boughs with open hearts. With one last glance at Glen Afton, its grandeur etched deeply in my memory's canvas for the rest of our days ahead on distant lands yet unseen, I understood that these woods were more than just trees and earth, or living legacy where spirits roamed free among leafy crowns. As we crossed out into a world beyond Glen Afton's protective embrace, once again toward new horizons awaiting us both, with open arms ready to receive travelers who carried within them the essence of this Takashi, and I stood atop a gentle hill overlooking Glen Afton as twilight embraced us, her golden hour painting everything with hues of fading daylights that spoke to our souls in whispers only felt under the watchful eyes of ancestral oaks. The air was cooler here above ground level. It carried a crispness like freshly fallen snowflakes melting on one's tongue, and we both drew deep breaths as if sucking life from these healing woods directly into our lungs. The setting sun had become an emblem of the days and a daily reminder that time ebbed like a tide within this sacred forest realm, where even eternity seemed to pause and listen in reverence, as if every creature held its breath, acknowledging Takashi's approach. The sky was painted with strokes of pink and orange, The horizon itself blushed at their presence, for tonight they were promised a dance under this celestial canvas or ballet choreographed by nature's hand, guiding each pirouette and leap among ancient trunks that had borne witness to countless seasons. As Takashi reached out with quivering fingers wrapped around the delicate handle of my cane, he traced its carved patterns in intricate labyrinths symbolizing paths traveled together through heartache and joy alike within these hallowed woods we had come to call home in our own way. His touch sent a shiver down my spine as memories cascaded upon me. The forest floor, once just earth beneath foot, now bore testament to shared laughter echoing like bubbles through water, and whispered secrets that wove themselves into leaves rustling with each gust of wind. "My friend," Takashi said in a voice as soft as falling petals, yet firmly anchored within the core of my being, "our journey has been long, a pilgrimage across lands where we discovered ourselves amidst life's grand tapestry." His words seemed to hang suspended between us. They bore weight without measure and lightness that could lift one's spirit skyward. "Yes," I replied with a smile, feeling the warmth return slowly through my cheeks at his acknowledgment of our shared history within this verdant cradler place, where time bowed in respect to those who walked its paths seeking solace or simply being present amongst ancient guardians and their tales. As night began her ascent upon us, we descended the hill hand in hand back into Glen Afton's embrace, our canes tapping a rhythm only heard by earth itself in gratitude for its steadfast support throughout life's unpredictable symphony of experiences. Our eyes met often along this path well trodden, reflecting the silhouettes cast upon us from the moonlight filtering through branches overhead, their shadows dancing like spectres accompanying our every step down memory lane as we sought refuge once more within these protective arms that held stories not just of nature, but also of human hearts entwined with its essence. Beneath starlit arches and under a canopy where constellations seemed close enough to touch, Takashi shared tales spun from his grandmother's lips, tales older than the oldest tree in Glen Afton, yet as fresh upon each telling like dew on morning petals. His stories were not simply recitations, but invocations of spirits that lingered within every hollow trunk and nestled under mossy rocks. They carried whispers from forgotten ears when time itself was young, eager to listen with eyes closed or open, as if the very forest hummed in harmony. As night deepened its hold upon us both, a velvet darkness punctuated only by fireflies like distant stars flickering along trails of light that beckoned secrets forth from within their luminescent hearts, Takashi and I became custodians once more to these revelations. Each tale spun was a thread in the tapestry where our footprints had mingled with countless others, leaving imprints on both earth and soul that would outlive even this night's passing glow. Our shared silence spoke volumes as we wandered together beneath boughs heavy with secrets. They held us in their folds like tender hands cradling fragile beings back to slumber's doorstep from dream-touched realms where fantasies and fear often blurred into one another. The woods breathed through Takashir, living, pulsating entity whose heartbeat resonated with the ancient rhythms echoing as night deepened its hold upon us, once azure velvet darkness punctuated only by fireflies like distant stars flickering along trails of light that beckoned secrets forth from within their luminescent hearts. Takashi and I became custodians yet more. Each tale spun wove into our consciousness, as if the very air round us carried whispers on its breath of words spoken by ancients long gone but not forgotten in the sacred grove of Glen Afton, where time flowed like a gentle stream that neither rushed nor tarried too dearly. Our footprints had mingled with countless others, leaving imprints on both earth and soul. These marks told stories richer than the most intricate tapestries or finest silks of olden time, stories embedded in every crevice of Glen Afton's ancient forest floor. I could still feel Takashi against my back as he breathed his warmth into me, a comforting presence that seemed to understand without words what the heart often struggles to express. Our shared silence spoke volumes with its tender understanding and unspoken bond or connection deeper than roots reaching for water in thirsty soil. As we continued on this moonlit journey through Glen Afton's embrace, Takashi guided me gently past the time-worn archway of twisting vines that marked our path back to his grandmother's cottage or structure, as much a part of these woods as any mighty oak. The air held notes of nostalgia and anticipation. There was no mistaking this night's significance for Takashi, though he wore an expression of serene contemplation that belied the depth within his spirit-laden gazer Lope had come to know well during our many shared evenings under these very boughs. Beyond, where twilight shadows played in harmony with silvered moonbeams, we found a secluded clearing encircled by ancient sentinels of green and brown. Here was the Heartwood's sanctum, sacred space known to Takashi as his grandmother's secret garden. As I followed him into its embrace, my senses were immediately enveloped in an ambience that transcended mere silence, a symphony played by rustling leaves and chirping crickets. The sigh of wind through hollow reeds told tales older than Glen Afton itself, each one carrying fragments from epochs when humanity was but infants learning to walk beneath this canopy. Upon reaching our destination, Takashi gestured for me to sit beside a moss-covered stone bench that seemed almost as old as the secrets it harbored. Here we would listen. Tonnet listened and remembered together, with his grandmother's words upon her lips echoing in my mind. It was said she had spoken truth, not just tales to pass time, but wisdom meant for those willing enough souls who sought answers beyond mere survival within Glen Afton's borders. Therein lay the key that unlocked doors otherwise impervious and opened windows into worlds where dreamers found refuge from harsh reality. As Takashi settled beside me, he whispered to begin our journey of recollection, or voyage back through time via stories shared by his grandmother's lips. The first was about a great fire that once raged across Glen Afton. Even in its destruction, it left behind lessons vital for those who sought harmony with nature and respect for all life interwoven within this ancient forest, or tale of renewal as much as loss, which spoke not only to the resilience inherent, but also to a kinship between every creature that called Glen Afton home. The second story Takashi chose unfolded like an intricate dance. It began with two spirits from opposing elements, one born of fire and another from water, a tale where their discordance threatened the very fabric of existence, until understanding bridged a chasm deep within themselves that mirrored Glen Afton's own dichotomous essence. The story carried us through cycles of bloom and wither. It was an allegory for life itself, teaching balance between growth and decay as fundamental to nature's grand design, where every end is but precursor to new beginnings, a reflection upon the very air that cradled our breathing forms within this night. Our next tale took us on a journey through time's own heartbeat, back when Glen Afton was naught but wild beauty and whisper promises among first humans who walked these grounds, seeking wisdom as much from trees as they did amongst their kin. Tales of how the oldest tree in town bore witness. The air had a serene chill as Takashi began to weave his tale from Glen Afton's rich tapestry of history, where every thread was imbued with life lessons passed down through generations, or testament not only to the village's past, but also its present and future. In times long before our own, Takashi started as his voice melded seamlessly into a rhythmic lullaby. Glen Afton was home to two guardians of nature's realm, one spirit that shimmered with the fiery hues of autumn leaves, and another that glistened like dew upon morning grass. Their names were Imberlin for fire and Aquilles for water, both born from Glen Afton's sacred springs beneath ancient oaks. Takashi's fingers traced invisible patterns in the air as he continued his narrative. Imberlin was a creature of warmth, a guardian who danced with flames that painted landscapes alive, and Aquilles flowed like melodies through streams. Yet their essences clashed. Fire sought to spread its reach, while water aimed always at preserving depth within pools. Their discord rippled across Glen Afton. Takashi's voice dipped lower, as if mimicking the gentle lapping of a brook, and their quarrel began with sparks and droplets that spattered over one another until they sought to consume each other. It was then an elder tree spoke in whispers deep from its rings older than time itself. He paused for effect, as if listening closely to the rustling leaves above him. Fire must warmth provide without burning away existence. Water should flow yet not flood life. Takashi's voice crescendoed with a sense of urgency. Imberlin and Aquilles faltered beneath this wisdom or truth that resonated within their spirits. He allowed silence to linger between the words, inviting tranquility into his listeners' hearts as they drifted closer in sleepy contemplation. With heavy hearts, Takashi narrated tenderly. The two guardians sought reconciliation with Glen Afton's teachings by embracing their differences and seeking a balance between the fire within them that gave life to new growth but also respected the water's role in purifying decay. Their journey led them through cycles of bloom, where Imberlin could ignite seeds with her warmth for germination. She worked hand in hand with Aquilles, who then nourished and quenched these tender sprouts. Takashi's narrative took on a dreamy quality as he painted pictures in the air of flowers flourishing under their care. Their dance was not one of competition, but cooperation or harmony that allowed Glen Afton to thrive. As seasons turned, continued his voice softly and deliberately, the spirits learned from each other. Imberlin's fire brought the warmth necessary for life's fervor during springtime blossoms, while Aquilles helped in cooling down when summer neared its zenith. Takashi paused, as if he could almost feel the sun on his skin and see a breeze stirring through Glen Afton. They became symbols of unity, teachers to all who dwell within this forest's embrace. In time, Takashi sighed contentedly into their collective memory bank. Glen Afton's humans learned from the Guardians. They planted trees that stood tall and resilient like Imberlin. They crafted waterways to mirror Aquilles. Flower Village dance of life harmony with Glen Afton itself. The tale concludes, Takashi whispered, as if closing a book, with every end birthing new beginnings. The spirits teach us that even in the quietest moments beneath moonlit skies or amidst golden sunsets, he glanced at his listeners with eyes closed and face serene. The cycle of life continues, with this final note hanging softly between them like dew on a spider's web before dawn breaks. Takashi's voice trailed off into the gentle darkness as Glen Afton continued to sleep beneath his stores or village cradled in tales where every loss is but prelude to rebirth, and balance reigns supreme within nature's grand design. In Chapter 19 of our tale, within Glen Afton's mystical embrace, Takashi began to weave a narrative that transcended seasons and years alike, a timeless reminder woven into his gentle lullabies about the enduring cycle of life. As he closed yet another chapter with soft-spoken reverence for nature's perpetual dance between growth and rest, Takashi's words carried a subtle hint at change on the horizon, once again a new challenge to balance against Glen Afton's harmony. The village had thrived under Imberlin's fiery spirit of resilience and Aquilles' cool wisdom for many seasons, yet something in their tranquil lives was about to stir anew with the rustling whispers among leaves that only spirits could understand or call from distant lands. Takashi spoke softly now, as if he himself were a feather upon Glen Afton's gentle breezes. Once, when all seemed still and silent under twilight's spell, Takashi started his tale on the eve of an auspicious lunar eclipse that promised to unite realms. In distant Valorir, kingdom woven with threads as vibrant as its history but plagued by discord among nobles, a plea for help had reached Glen Afton's guardians through the veins of nature itself. Imberlin and Aquilles, he continued to share their wisdom that flowed from Glen Afton's heart. The humans listened intently as Takashi recounted how, during a time when harvests were plenty yet shadows crept at dusk with foreboding intent, the guardians of Glen Afton had offered sage advice. In unity there is strength, they'd said, a simple phrase that resonated deeply within their community. As seasons turned and winters faded into springs once more beneath Glen Afton's watchful gaze, Takashi wove tales of the guardians visiting Valoria to restore balance, through wisdom imparted from his cherished homeward tale, where both warmth in spring and coolness under summer's intense sun were revered as sacred acts. Takashi paused for a moment now and glanced out at Glen Afton's people, who had become so deeply rooted to their way of life that even the most subtle changes left them curious. But why must we venture beyond these familiar borders? Takashi whispered with an air of mystery. For as Imberlin teaches us resilience and Aquilles shows cool resolve, there is yet a lesson in embracing diversity, intermingling of energies for growth. Within this chapter's warm embrace lay the echo of past tales, where Glen Afton had faced trials beyond its woodland borders. The guardians remembered when an invasive blight once threatened to strangle their beloved trees, and with Aquilles' counsel on adaptation they too learned how diversity could bring strength against shared adversaries. As Takashi's voice rose like the crescendo of a nocturne under starlit skies in Glen Afton, where every creature played its part harmoniously within nature's orchestra, he imparted to listeners that their own village might learn from these past experiences. Just as our guardians once sought wisdom beyond us, Takashi mused softly. The villagers of Glen Afton now pondered upon the stories with a newfound understanding, a realization dawning within them like sunlight after rain, and they realized it was time to extend their reach across lands yet untouched by their hands or spirits. Perhaps, Takashi suggested gently between his words of wisdom, In Chapter 19, closing moments, before the night could fully claim silence as its own, he shared tales not just from Glen Afton's lush canopy but also whispers on wind-carried currents to distant lands. "The spirits have spoken," Takashi concluded with a smile that seemed to stretch beyond human comprehension. And so the humans of Glen Afton learned, through their guardians' teachings and tales from across realms, about courage, resilience, wisdom, adaptation, and most importantly, unity in diversity, which fortified them for whatever new adventures awaited just beyond their forest home's embrace. As Takashi drew to a close his narrative of Chapter 19 with the grace and poise that had always accompanied him throughout Glen Afton's seasons, her village cradled in tales, nestled beneath Takashi's voice, resonated through Glen Afton with a warmth that seemed to wrap around each villager like a cherished blanket, drawing them closer into his tale as they nestled in their cozy homes underneath 0726 the stars. Gentle watch. The night was alive. It listened and whispered secrets of wisdom back through Takashi's narrative serenade that promised both solace and adventure to those willing enough to hear its tales spill forth from his lips into their eager minds. "It is in the dance with shadows we find our light," he began, as a soft hush fell upon Glen Afton like dew on morning leavest, kind of stillness that feels both profound and comforting all at once. The tales had begun to take root within their hearts when Takashi spoke about an ancient spirit known only by the name Irenaeus in distant realms, a guardian whose legend was intertwined with Glen Afton's own history like vines around its sturdy trunks and wise old trees. Irenaeus had once walked amongst these same villagers before time folded into the pages of myth a presence that guided them through trials when they faced a great darkness, teaching resilience with each step forwarded by his ethereal form. Takashi's voice was tender as he painted pictures of Irenaeus' journey. He saw not just what lay before him in the tangible earth, but also beyond towards unforeseen horizons. With every challenge, with each trial, continued Takashi, his eyes glinting like stars reflecting off a calm lake's surface as if he himself were gazing into an endless night sky of stories and histories yet to be told. Irenaeus taught us that wisdom is not merely accumulated, but also shared like seeds scattered upon fertile ground. Our knowledge must reach others across the divide. The villagers listened intently as Takashi spun a story where Glen Afton was once visited by travelers from afar. They were scholars of wind and rain who spoke in riddles wrapped around their words or language that seemed to flow with nature's own rhythm, understood only through the heart's silent beat beneath its soothing cadence as Takashi weaved them into Glen Afton's soulful history. These travelers had come bearing tales of distant lands where harmony lived among diversity and unity blossomed like a meadow after spring rains, an alliance between people, animals, plants, spirits. They learned from each other as much as one another taught them about the strength found in embracing differences. They shared with Glen Afton that even when cultures were worlds apart, their hearts could beat together to a single pulse of understanding and kindness, or melody so profound it resonated within every villager's core. Takashi's story grew deeper as he narrated how these visitors guided the Glen Afton guardians in fostering connections with other villages, creating symphonies from discordant notes that had once seemed unbridgeable, or testament to trust and openness being threads woven into a tapestry of communal strength. The night grew older as Takashi continued his tale. Stories flowed like honey in the warmth of shared experience, teaching Glen Afton's children about their guardians' bravery when they united to repel dark forces that sought dominion over not just this village, but other lands near and far. They did so with an arsenal forged from trust, he recounted, as villagers felt the weight of responsibility settle upon them, understanding it was their duty to uphold such a legacy in every new day that greeted Glen Afton's awakening sun. In his final thoughts before sleep beckoned with its familiar call to restfulness, Takashi spoke about the enduring spirit of Irenaeus, and how he lived on within each village, a reminder not only of wisdom passed through ages, but also a promise for tomorrow's generations. "As long as we remember our stories," said Takashi with gentle conviction that echoed like an unwavering truth, "we carry the essence of unity and courage in every breath." With these final words hanging softly between the mass symphony for their souls to ponder upon through dreams, embraced, Takashi concluded his tale. The villagers awoke with spirits alighted by newfound resolve, ready now not only to listen, but also to share the tales of courage and unity that had, as Chapter 20 drew to a close with Takashi's heartfelt words still lingering in their ears, they turned over for sleep, yet found themselves wrapped not just in blankets, but also enveloped by thoughts of what lay ahead, her narrative steeped in courage and unity that needed continuation. Chapter 21. In the whispering meadows the sun had barely kissed the horizon, painting it with hues of orange and pink when Irenaeus' spirit seemed to whisper through Takashi once more as he began his tale on a gentle Sunday morning. The children still felt that touch of warmth in their hearts from stories heard only yesterday, or feeling so strong they couldn't help but sit cross-legged, sharing glances with one another before opening wide and listening intently to the tales Takashi was about to weave. Irenaeus had once been a shepherd, he began in his calm, honeyed voice that always seemed more like music than speech when telling stories under the ancient oaks of Glen Afton's meadows, where they all loved to gather after school hours for play and camaraderie. He was not just any pastor. Irenaeus had seen seasons come full circle, witnessing life's ebb and flow from his modest parish. It wasn't until a darker season descended upon the land that their peaceful existence would be tested, the return of forces seeking to sow discord where there was once harmony. But these children knew Irenaeus as an emblem not just for faith but also resilience, his legacy intertwined with Glen Afton's very own guardians who had faced the same encroaching shadow in the past and emerged united, stronger than before. The night of our struggle, Takashi continued to weave words like soft threads into a tapestry that depicted shared history. The stars themselves seemed afraid as darkness embraced Glen Afton. He described how Irenaeus had taken command with wisdom beyond his years, a shepherd who led not just sheep, but also souls to safety. It was in this moment the children realized their own role within a legacy much larger than they could fathom. It wasn't merely about standing against darkness, but doing so together as one family of hearts and minds, united by faith yet strengthened through actions that echoed courageous tales like Irenaeus. Takashi paused for effect. Even during the night's trial, he whispered into their young ears with reverence befitting such a storyteller's role in passing down Ledger 0NS. The guardians of Glen Afton did not falter. He spoke of how Irenaeus had gathered his congregation under moonlight and starlight alike to share tales that fortified their resolve, and when he was no longer among them, departed from this world by the forces they resisted, but never defeated, leaving behind a legacy tinged with sadness yet buoyed on waves of hopeful promise for Glen Afton's children and beyond. For Irenaeus, Takashi said as he looked into their curious eyes, he had not only preached faith in the face of darkness, but also lived it. And herein lay a lesson that transcended mere history, a testament to how each small act of courage could ripple through time and space. The guardians, Takashi narrated as if he was there amongst them, were not just protectors by duty but also mentors for the young. They taught Glen Afton's children that every heartbeat is a drumming cadence to their own march forward, a reminder of Irenaeus' undying spirit. The guardians had learned from him how unity in diversity could be as potent an armor against threats, real and perceived alike. And so Takashi concluded his narration with a smile that seemed to cradle the very essence of Glen Afton's spirit. We too shall remember Irenaeus. The children felt as if they had been transported back in time within these tales, her journey through courage and unity's trials. He ended his tale with a note that would become an emblem for the village. In every dark night of our lives, let us be guided by Irenaeus' wisdom to find light. Takashi then stood up slowly as if relinquishing control over time itself and said good night. As they nestled back under blankets that day seemed a bit, as Takashi's voice softened with each word he spoke, his young audience listened intently as they lay sprawled across their beds in Glen Afton's cozy village, how very night after hearing tales of valor and unity taught by the guardians who lived through darkness but also fought for it. The essence of Irenaeus' spirit seemed to permeate every story, his wisdom a beacon that shone brightly in each narrative Takashi wove with threads from history's tapestry. In Chapter 22, the children closed their eyes and let themselves become part of this living lore, a testament not just to bygone heroes, but also to how those stories could be passed down as seeds for growth in young hearts, such as Glen Afton's own future generation. Takashi's next tale would continue where his last one left off, guiding the listeners on a journey through time and mindset that mirrored their shared dreams of peaceful coexistence under Irenaeus' enduring legacy. And so it began with an ancient prophecy or whisper from times before memory could grasp its significance, but one heart in Glen Afton knew the truth as if he had lived those very centuries himself, his grandfather being a keeper of oral histories and tales, untold until Takashi's voice carried them across generations. The prophecy foretold that another would rise to face darkness anew, one who bore in their heart the spirit of Irenaeus, or young soul from Glen Afton, whose courage was as bright and steadfast as any star on a cloudless night sky. This prophesied child had been born under auspicious signs, when unity's light seemed faintest, but would grow to learn that true strength lay in togetherness against the encroaching shadows of discord, much like Irenaeus himself, or hero whose legacy now lived anew within this village. Takashi spoke with a calm assurance, as if he could see into their minds and touch their hearts directly, for these children had all felt that flicker in the spirit when they first heard of Glen Afton's dark past, where fear once sought to silence hope like an unwelcome storm. Now it was through Irenaeus' tailor mosaic of battles fought and alliances forged from unlikely kinships that peace had prever 085 protected their village against the creeping frostbite of strife, teaching them to find unity in diversity, as if a hidden gem beneath layers of dirt. "Remember," Takashi whispered into his imaginations with each word he spoke at this very moment, "the darkness we face is not just outside our doors, but within the hearts that fear it." He urged them to look beyond their own reflections in the mirrors before sleeping, to see themselves as bearers of light. The children's minds wandered through scenes where once there stood an ancient forest, its trees tall and wise. They saw how Irenaeus had learned from a spirit that dwelled within these very woods to understand differences not with contempt but curiosity or lesson in empathy as timeless as the stars. The guardians taught him of unity's strength when faced against common threats, which he then passed on like an amulet for their souls to carry forth into slumber and beyond it towards tomorrow's promise, with resilience etched within each heartbeat. As Takashi narrated the village square where Irenaeus once stood, or place now turned memorial garden, his voice weaved through a dance of blooming flowers that seemed to nod in agreement as they swayed gently on their wooden stakes under moonlight's silver caress. Here children would gather and share tales with each other about the courage Irenaeus inspired when darkness loomed over Glen Afton, his voice echoing from a time past into this one of shared dreams beneath blankets woven by weavers who had once heard stories like these themselves, histories that bound them all together. In Takashi's telling lay the journey through courage and unity's trials as if they were living it, his words not just a recount, but an incantation for peace within their very souls, a reminder of Irenaeus' undying spirit that would carry Glen Afton forward. They felt embraced by the love this village harbored, when all stood together against fear and misunderstanding, as if each story was a hand clasping them in warmth beneath their covers on these quiet nights. Beside Takashi the children huddled closer, as if drawn by some invisible thread through time itself. Their eyes grew wide in wonderment at his stories, where Irenaeus stood tall, an embodiment of resilience and unity against the threats that once hung over them like a heavy cloud threatening to burst into rain. Takashi's voice seemed not merely telling tales, but painting visions upon their young minds, a world painted with the bravery's bold strokes, where every heartbeat was an echo of Irenaeus' spirit. He stood firm as the mountain stands against howling wind, began Takashi, his words floating on a breeze that carried away any remnants of fear or uncertainty from Glen Afton's history books and into their shared reality, where every child learned to face darkness with Irenaeus' light guiding them. As the moon climbed higher in its nightly journey, Takashi spun a yarn about how once upon an era, when shadows stretched long across Glen Afton's cobblestone streets and fear had begun weaving itself into hearts like tangled vines around ancient trees, Irenaeus appeared. His presence alone was as calming to the troubled spirits of village folk, his mere steps akin to gentle raindrops on parched earth that brought nourishment rather than despair. The children listened with reverence and quiet delight. They felt themselves partaking in Irenaeus' journey, or path illuminated by stars unseen, but deeply felt within their own spirits of bravery, compassion, and solidarity against all odds that came to pass or might yet come. Even the moon does not fear nightfall, Takashi whispered with a twinkle in his eye as he recalled Irenaeus' teachings that every soul holds within them an enduring light, one which can pierce through any darkness that seeks to envelop hearts. Together they felt embraced by this love when all of Glen Afton stood united against fear and misunderstanding. Their shared narratives were not just stories, but a collective embrace, as warm as the sun on summer days, wrapping them in comfort beneath Takashi's guiding words like blankets woven from moonbeams. As night deepened into its velvety depths around Glen Afton's memorial garden and children began to tuck themselves within their covers, a silent promise was made that Irenaeus would never be forgotten, his legacy living on in every breath they took, a testament of strength woven through generations. Takashi's voice grew softer as he spoke the final words into the night air before sleep claimed them one by one, a reminder to carry Irenaeus' undying spirit forward with each new sun or zero W that rose over Glen Afton, his stories a lantern guiding their way through tomorrow's promise. With hearts lighter and souls fortified against the trials of yesterday or those yet unveiled on life's uncertain horizon, children in Glen Afton felt safe under Takashi's tales that bound them together with threads spun from courage, unity, resilience etched within each heartbeat. As they drifted into dreams cradled by history itself and the comforting presence of a storyteller who knew just how to turn nightfall's silence into an embrace as tender as love's own whisper, the essence of Irenaeus lived on, his spirit forever intertwined with Glen Afton. And so their stories continued, each child becoming not only a keeper but also a bearer of the legacy passed down through generations in this village where history and heartbeats danced together beneath starlit Skeezer, testament to Irenaeus' enduring spirit that would carry Glen Afton forward into tomorrow. As Takashi's final words faded, one child stirred a little more awake than the rest, eyes closed, but minds still racing with images of courage and unity as vividly painted by Irenaeus' legacy in as dawn painted its first light over Glen Afton. A whisper of stories began to weave itself through the waking minds of children and parents alike, a tapestry rich with tales passed down from Takashi Kuroda himself, as if by magic or perhaps merely due to his remarkable gift for storytelling that blended history with heart's warmth. Irenaeus had become more than a name. He was the embodiment of strength and togetherness in this village where every home seemed like a small castle surrounded by verdant fields. The children gathered each morning at Takashi's porch as eagerly as they did when tales spun under starlight, their eyes reflecting both wonderment and wisdom that only stories can bestow upon the young hearts listening intently to his voice or gentle yet commanding presence in every child's life. Today was no different, but it held a promise of something special. Today Irenaeus would share with them an ancient tale, one told at their very first meeting years ago when Takashi had been given the honor by elders to be chosen as village storyteller, an auspicious beginning that now felt like fate. Irenaeus cleared his throat and began. Long ago, in a time far removed from our own, there existed an island where harmony reigned supreme among its inhabitants. Takashi paused for effect before continuing with the tale of how one day peace was shattered by outside forces and invasion that brought fear but also revealed the strength within. As Irenaeus spoke of unity and courage, a sense of purpose ignited in each heartbeat amongst his listeners as they listened to stories steeped with lessons from their ancestors, trials and triumphs, tales where adversity was met not by division but through resilience, a concept that resonated deeply within them. Glen Afton, under the watchful eye of Takashi's storytelling prowess, had become a beacon for all who sought refuge in shared histories and communal strength. Its children learned to stand together as one force against any storm, but literal or figurative rains that threatened their way of life. And so Irenaeus' voice softened with emotion. It was when the shadows grew long on our ancestral home that a child's innocent curiosity led to an unearthing. A small group of children had discovered ancient relics or chalice and ring inscribed with symbols unknown. These objects held tales as old as time, whispers from history begging for remembrance, but also carrying warnings about the fragility of peace when forgotten by generations past. As Irenaeus wove this new thread into yesterday's stores or bridge that spanned both ears and emotions within Glen Afton's people, an uncanny feeling settled over them, as if each child felt a connection to the souls of their ancestors who had lived through times where courage was not just forged in adversity but celebrated. The village elders listened from beside Takashi's side with furrowed brows and knowing eyes. They sensed that these ancient artifacts held secrets vital to understanding how Glen Afton's spirit of unity could be preserved, ensuring their children would not forget the strength found in togetherness. Takashi paused again as he reached a part where Irenaeus spoke of an age-old pact that bound families and communities, or sacred covenant made when peace was more than just desired but essential for survival, creating bonds stronger than the fiercest steel. This passage brought forth nods from the elders who knew well how precious these connections were. As Takashi finished his tale, Irenaeus and Glenafton's ancestors, or story, that had begun in whispers through time, reaching out to them now as a guiding star, looked upon each child with pride. They were not merely listeners, but co-storytellers about to embark on their own journeys. They understood the weight of history and its power to shape futures yet unseen, but also felt it in every fiber that was woven into being by stories shared across generations, her legacy passed down, a promise kept alive with each telling. For as Irenaeus had once said under moonlight long ago, in the heart of Glen Afton beats not just one, but many hearts, for every story told is another's memory cherished and lived. The village children knew this to their core, holding tightly on these tales that tethered them all told for a testament to Iris. Takashi's voice faded into a gentle hum on his lips. He closed another chapter of their journey through history with an ending that promised new beginnings in its embrace. Chapter 25, The Heirloom Revealed. This was not just any tale, but one deeply rooted in the Glen Afton legacy, where each generation left imprints on others' hearts, like delicate lacework interwoven with gold threads of wisdom and experience through time. Underneath a canopy that stretched across as if to shield them from reality's harsh daylight glare, the children gathered in their ancestral home once more. The very same walls had witnessed countless such gatherings under similar circumstances over generations past. Their grandmother's voice was buttery smooth like honey that dripped into teacups when she began to speak of an heirloom, a time-worn locket, not just any trinket, as one might mistakenly perceive it. At first glance he had carried within its heart the likeness of their forebears. As Takashi narrated with reverent tones how his great-grandmother had found this heirloom in a hidden compartment behind an ancient family portrait, eyes wide as saucers reflecting back secrets from eras bygone and faces etched deep lines like valleys carved out over time, the children listened intently to the tale of their ancestor Emily, who discovered it during one of those fateful nights when whispers traveled through secret passages between Glen Afton households, weaving stories together under a moonlit sky that had silently observed generations unfold her storyteller's dream. The locket, Takashi continued with his calm cadence, was no ordinary keepsake. It was the vessel of an unspoken truth and a testament to shared fates entangled in its very essence. The children hung on to every word as he described how Emily had been entrusted by her grandmother, Elinor, a pillar among their kin, one who knew well that some treasures are not meant for the eyes, but rather felt with souls. It was a day like any other when young Irenaeus took his father's hand and followed him through Glen Afton's cobblestone paths to an old oak tree, where Emily had once confided in her closest friend about the locket she carried on that bore not only their likeness, but also of a woman whose name was as rare as the tales whispered on these very streets. This mysterious Eleanor's presence still lingered like an unspoken promise, one which Irenaeus would eventually inherit and understand in due time when he felt his own pulse sync with hers, encased within that ancient silver heart, or moment of destiny unfolding quietly, as if to say the past always holds keys for tomorrow. Takashi's voice became a river flowing into their consciousness, carrying them along its course, where they learned about Eleanor's journey from this hidden village through lands beyond Glen Afton, a path often trodden by those who sought wisdom and the kindling of bonds that transcended simple kinship. He spoke with a reverence for stories untold, yet shared enough to let their imaginations paint pictures within themselves as they envisioned Eleanor's silhouette against firelight under starlit skies, on her travels, her solitary figure in search of something more profound than the life she knew. As Takashi wove through tales that stretched across generational divides, he spoke fondly of Emily's return to Glen Afton after years spent threading connections between families and communities, just as their ancestors had done, her hands always clutching something precious against her skin when recounting stories she'd gathered like pearls from distant shores. He described how, upon reaching home for the last time before embarking on a journey that would etch itself into Glen Afton's history as deeply as their own roots had done to its soil, left behind an unfinished tale and her legacy entrusted in him with solemn promises of what was yet to come. And then there were the tales shared between Emily's closest confidant at that very oak tree, Irenaeus, Father Glen Afton himself, on nights when he would stand beneath the same boughs and whisper into his son's ear of a future where their lineage was remembered as guardians not just to traditions but also in stewarding the land. Takashi narrated how Glen, with eyes reflect in chapter 26 of Takashi's narrative, he continued to regale his audience with stories that were heavy with ancestral wisdom and intimate connections to nature as they sat under knee zero and a grand oak tree in Glen Afton, to very heartbeat of the village. The moon hung low in the sky like an opal between night's velvet folds, its light spilling onto Takashi's weathered face and illuminating his eyes that held stories not just within, but also beyond their reach. "As I sit here with my son," Glen Afton began, voice as steady as the ancient tree under which they stood, "I see a reflection of who we are in him, a mistake piece from our family's heart to be placed among his own." His gaze softened. He was about to share something that had lingered at the back of Glen's mind for years. "One day," continued Takashi, with a gentle smile touching the corners of his mouth like dew on morning grasses, when Emily returned home from her travels across seas and through souls in search of belonging, a journey that was both literal and metaphysical to find where she truly belonged, she found much more than what Glen could have ever imagined for himself or their community. Glen's heart swelled with pride at the mention, but he knew Emily's story still lay untold on her lips like a melody unsung until its time comes to sing forth into existence. She had left behind not just an empty nest and whispered goodbyes echoing between their walls, but also mysterious tokens of knowledge she claimed were meant for him, entrusted with the promise that he would carry them forward as torchbearers in Glen Afton's legacy when her time came to its rest. And now Takashi turned his attention back on Emily's absence, which felt like an abyss, yet somehow sacred and comforting all at once. "The village looks upon us with expectant eyes as custodians of a future that intertwines the threads of tradition into something new, an inheritance from our ancestors, but also one for those who will follow." As Takashi spoke further about Emily's return to Glen Afton and her intentions, he painted vivid images in their minds with words. They could almost see herself walking down cobblestone streets bathed by the soft glow of gaslight lanterns, as she carried something pulsating within a leather satchel, a relic from faraway lands, that whispered secrets when held to one's heart, binding her traveler's soul with their land. The stories unfolded further into Takashi's tales of how Emily sought not just the tangible treasures, but also intangible connections among people and nature, how she discovered in Glen Afton a symbiotic relationship where every person had an integral role to play, much like each petal on their beloved village flower. Her legacy wasn't merely about preserving customs. It was cultivating them with the wisdom of diversity as her guidepost for stewardship and guardianship over Glen Afton's fertile landscapes which had cradled generations before her to this very moment. One such tale Takashi shared, one that held his father's legacy within its folds like a delicate origami figure of time itself, her story about the Great Drought and how Glen Afton's ancestors found unity when they faced it together, their bonding over water from sacred springs untouched by scorching sun. It was through these shared experiences, where elders would gather around ancient stone circles under star-studded skies to pray for rain or recount tales of the earth's benevolence during bountiful seasons, that Glen Afton's identity as protectors and nurturers became a living thing. The night deepened into twilight, with Takashi weaving narratives that transcended time itself, stories where every generation learned to listen for the land's whispers through their ancestors', wisdom imprinted in each grain of soil and echoing across Glen Afton Castle ruins. He described how Emily had come upon these tales, her eyes opening like night skies parted by dawn as she uncovered layers within stories passed down to her mother's generation, her journey through the land, a pilgrimage toward understanding their shared humanity and Earth's rhythms that needed no translation. As Takashi finished his recitation, he looked over at Glen with eyes brimming not just with reminiscence, but also anticipation for what lay ahead, as Takashi's voice grew softer and his words spun a dreamlike tapestry of time. Emily felt herself slipping into sleep's embrace alongside her father on that starlit night at Glen Afton Castle ruins. The stories he told seemed to weave themselves around them like the gentle strands of morning mist clinging to ancient stones. They were tales not just of water and drought, but also of love found in shared silence beneath a sky so vast it made one's heart swell with ancestral pride. The next day greeted Emily's sun-kissed cheeks as she continued her pilgrimage through the land that had become both home and history to Glen Afton's lineage, where every tree whispered a verse of yesteryears, and each stone echoed with silent testimony. She followed paths worn by generations before her. They were etched not in wood but woven into clay pots bearing the seeds that had survived centuries past, seeds which carried stories as well, tales of resilience passed from hands to soil within Glen Afton's sacred grounds. The village was a quiet symphony on this day, unlike any other. Children played with laughter in open fields, where once only drought-stricken despair had held sway or testament to the unity and strength she learned about through her father's stories of Glen Afton's ancestors. It seemed as though even nature itself recognized the bounty bestowed upon them, for a gentle rain fell that afternoon like blessings from above. Each droplet was music on green leaves, telling tales in its own right, a harmony Emily felt resonate within her very soul. In Glen Afton's heart stood an ancient oak tree, where once gathered the elders, and now it watched over a new generation as they celebrated with ribbons of blue for sky-like festivals that honored both rain gods and Earth Mother. Emily contributed by planting seeds around its vast roots. She felt connected to Glen Afton in ways she could never have imagined before her journey began, her pilgrim finding a home within the embrace of history, culture, love entwined with nature's unyielding cycle that had sustained their people through times both harsh and gentle alike. As twilight approached on this special day, Emily joined Takashi once more at Glen Afton Castle ruins for another tale, this time one of the future. They were to face together as stewards not just of land, but also guardians against forgetting their pasts in pursuit of tomorrows. They spoke quietly about upcoming seasons and how each harvest would be a celebration, ensuring Glen Afton's traditions endured through time, like the stories that flowed from Takashi's lips, or promise to carry forward what had been given before him by his father and now entrusted in Emily. As night blanketed Glen with its nurturing cover, a sense of continuity settled within her. She felt as though each breath was the next word inscribed into history's grand narrative tale that would unfold across generations, much like Takashi's stories had done for his mother and those before. The fire flickered with life under Emily's care, its dance a visual echo of her own heartbeat as she listened to the land through her father. It was here within these ancient stones and starlit skies that Glen Afton's spirit truly lived, her legacy shared in stories told around water springs beneath moon-kissed moons. The following day brought a morning so serene, Emily found herself reflecting on Takashi's tales as she sipped tea from cups forged by her own hands that evening prior. The warmth of each sip seemed to carry whispers of ancient wisdom and newfound purpose intertwined. As Glen Afton's people ventured forth into their daily labors, they did so with hearts full of gratitude, a community united in respect for past hardships overcome through unity like a phoenix rising from the ashes. This resilience would be passed down to Emily and her peers who had known nothing but peace. Within Glen Afton's embrace were tales of old intertwined with daily life in an eternal dance of culture and nature's bounty, lay a sense that the world beyond its borders was not as far removed from their reality or shared humanity stretching across continents to touch even those who had never wandered here. It became clear to Emily on this journey through Glen Afton's soulful heartland. She understood her place. Emily settled into a quiet corner of Glen Afton's library, a sanctuary where time seemed to stand still amidst leather-bound tomes and faded maps that whispered secrets only felt, not read. Today was no ordinary day. Today marked the anniversary of her father's most profound life lessons, shared with her under a canopy woven by ancient willows whose leaves told stories in shades of green as varied as human emotions themselves. As she traced her fingers over an old map depicting Glen Afton's legendary past intertwined within the very fabric of nature itself, Emily felt compelled to honor these tales with a journey or pilgrimage back through time and heartland that had sculpted their community's spirit. It was during this reverie she chanced upon an aged journal belonging to her father's great-great-grandmother, Ikuko. The leather cracked like dry earth under summer sunsets, but held within its pages a world unmarred by time or woman whose soul echoed Glen Afton's very essence. The first entry spoke of an era where whispers among trees were heard as clear calls to action, and kinship was forged in shared hardships against the encroaching shadows that sought their way of life. Emily's heart swelled with a connection she had not fully realized before her ancestors, lives painted vividly across generations, like stars, dotting night skies, unblinking but ever-changing above Glen Afton. The narrative within Ikuko's journal led her to the remnants of an old stone bridge, where under its arches lay a forgotten well that had quenched thirst and provided solace in times when rain was as precious as water from distant rivers sought by parched lands alow. With each step Emily took towards this historical site her journey through Glen Afton's heartland, which now felt like her own personal pilgrimage, uncovered layers of the community's resilience, much like peeling back petals to reveal pollen at a seedling's core. Within these hallowed grounds lay an ancient tree that had withstood countless storms and sunny days alike. Its roots were as intertwined within Glen Afton's history as they were beneath the ground, or silent sentinel to stories of love, loss, and redemption. Emily knelt by this stoic guardian, where she could nearly hear it whisper back tales only a soul like Ikuko's might tell. These murmurs carried her father's spirit forward into an era that sought the same unity. A world beyond Glen Afton stretched out in all its vastness, yet intimately connected through shared human experiences. As she sat beneath this arboreal beacon of strength and continuity, Emily understood now more than ever her place within a lineage far greater than just herself, or even the present-day Glen Afton, a thread in an enduring tapestry woven by countless hands through generations. The essence she found here was not simply about history. It was living proof of humanity's resilience, their ability to rise from ashes and create beauty amidst adversity, like a flower pushing forth after winter's retreat. The sun dipped lower in the sky when Emily emerged with newfound purpose, threaded into her being a legacy inherited not just of blood, but one that she now embraced through shared experiences, stories whispering to those who would listen and learn from Glen Afton's spirit etched deeply within its earth. She realized this was a gift beyond mere lineage. It offered lessons on how interconnected life truly is, a world where even the smallest act could ripple across oceans of change, binding humanity closer together with every beat of shared heartstrings that resonated through Glen Afton's legacy. As night enveloped her, zero elding in a blanket woven from stars and moonbeams, her celestial reflection mirroring the natural world around her, Emily felt herself as much a part of this place, its history, and its future promise. For Glen Afton was not just where she stood, but who she had become. She knew that with every sunrise hereafter came an opportunity to walk alongside those spirits like Ikuko's, whose echoes would guide her through life's dance, a journey of discovery within the heart of a community rooted in respect, gratitude, and ever reaching toward horizons only dreamt about. With that last thought, as she walked